Hello, world history students. This is Mr. Everton, and this is video 4.3 about Spain and their empire in the Americas. This is where we're going to learn about how Spain colonized the Americas, why they did that, how they did that, and you'll be asked to answer this question at the end of the video. So it's a complex question. How did Spain conquer the Americas? And it's worth asking because the Aztecs and the Incas and other peoples in the America were sophisticated, and there were a lot of them. One important part of the answer is disease. And we're going to talk more about disease in the next video on the Columbian Exchange. Excuse me. But for now, it's good to know that something like maybe, and we don't know the exact number, but maybe something like 90% of the people in the Americas when Columbus first arrived were wiped out by a variety of European illnesses. Smallpox, measles, mumps, typhoid, malaria, like any disease that Europeans had come into contact with and were able to bring across the Atlantic Ocean. And the thing is that Europeans had immunities, right? Like Europeans had been catching these diseases for thousands of years. And so they had built up immunities in the European community. And none of the Native Americans, none of the indigenous peoples of the Americas had those immunities. So smallpox and measles and these other diseases spread very quickly through the Americas, killing vast amounts of the people who lived there. This is probably, I mean, there's not really a probably. This is the worst pandemic in the history of the world. It killed probably something like 90% of the people of the Americas. So that's a huge part of it, right? Like the people of the Americas were weakened by that. But then another part of that, and historians debate this, it's also really important to recognize that the Spanish had horses. The Spanish were wearing armor. They had steel swords that were better than the weapons that the Aztecs and the Incas had. They had gunpowder weapons. They had cannons and rifles. So there's a variety of reasons why this happened, but it did happen. The Aztecs and the Incas lost very quickly to the Spanish armies that fought them, the conquistadors, led by people like Cortez and Pizarro, were able to take over. This is a painting of the Battle of Tenochtitlan when the Spanish conquered the Aztecs. So it's like disease is probably the most important factor, but these other factors of like more advanced weapons and access to horses, those are also important factors for understanding why it happened. So after the Americas were conquered, the Americas, and it didn't happen all at once, right? And it didn't happen like not the entire territory that you see on this map is all controlled by Spain. There's still little pockets here and there of Native Americans who are living without having been conquered. Eventually, over time, those peoples would be assimilated. But what the Spanish did was they broke their colonies up into territories called viceroyalties, which are basically like, mini countries controlled by Spain. And then they put viceroys in charge of these sections of the Americas. So like the viceroyalty of New Spain, you can see on the map, includes most of what is today Mexico. The viceroyalty of New Granada is a lot of Central America and Northern South America, like Colombia and Venezuela. And then the viceroyalty of Peru takes up what used to be the Inca Empire. And the viceroyalty of Brazil was controlled by the Portuguese, actually. Brazil is the part of the Americas that was taken over by the Portuguese, which is why today in Brazil they speak Portuguese and not Spanish. But anyway, these viceroys are governors who are responsible for running this territory for the Spanish king. A lot of the conquistadors were given land in the Americas, and they called this the encomienda system, where they would give a piece of land to a soldier who fought for Spain to conquer the Americas, and with that land would come all of the indigenous people who lived there. And so encomienda means like entrust. So the idea was supposed to be the land and the people on it were being entrusted to this conquistador, and that the people who lived on the land would have to do work for this Spanish ruler, and that in exchange, the Spanish ruler of the encomienda would protect the indigenous people and teach them about Christianity. But the reality is that, it basically amounted to slavery. Like the Native Americans who lived on the land were forced to work for the conquistador, and he didn't really usually do much other than just benefit from their hard work. This is all part of an economic system that we need to understand in order to understand colonies. So how Spain profited from the Americas is part of this system called mercantilism. So, it's almost Thanksgiving. A lot of people eat pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving. I know I plan to. There's only a limited amount of pie, right? So if your grandma gets a piece of pie that's like a quarter of the pie, that's a quarter of the pie gone to your grandma. And then if your mom gets another quarter of the pie, that's half the pie gone. There's only half the pie left. And so, you're competing against the other people in your family to see who can get the most pie, right? And that's kind of a messed up way of thinking about Thanksgiving, but there's a limited amount of pie. And if you want to be able to, if you really love pumpkin pie, you're going to be trying to make sure that you get as much pie as possible. So mercantilism is an economic system that thinks of money that way. There's a limited amount of gold and silver in the world. And so countries like Spain, who are practicing mercantilism, they believed that they needed to accumulate as much gold and silver as possible before other countries got it. And so having colonies was a way to do that. If you could establish colonies, you could, one, take their gold and silver. Two, you could take advantage of them. You could get all of their natural resources, bring them back to your country, where you'll then turn them into manufactured goods, and then you can sell them back to the colony. So you're making money by taking their natural resources, and then you're making money again by selling manufactured goods back to them. And then you also don't allow the colonies to trade with each other. They're only allowed to trade with you, which again is creating what we call a favorable balance of trade, which leads money to flow into the mother country away from the colony. And this is going to allow Spain to accumulate a lot of gold and silver. And that process is called mercantilism. So a great example of mercantilism is a literal mountain of silver that the Spanish found in Bolivia at a place called Potosi. I also hear it called Potosi, but I'm going to say Potosi. It's probably wrong. If you want to say Potosi, I've heard many people say that. So they find this mountain of silver, and they're like, hot dog, we've got literally the largest silver mine in the world. And so they set about mining the silver, and what do they use the silver for? To make coins like this one that you see here. They stamp the Spanish king's head on it, and that creates more money for the Spanish economy. Yay for Spain. They're so happy. So the way that they are going to get workers, because working in mines is incredibly dangerous. I don't know if you knew that. It's not a great job. Not really what you want. So the Incas, who used to control Potosi, they had a labor system in place called the Mita system, where the way you paid your taxes, if you were somebody who lived in the Inca Empire, was by doing a little bit of work for the Incas. You didn't pay taxes in terms of money or food necessarily, but you would give them some of your labor, 10% of your labor. There'd be times set aside in the year where you would do projects to help make the empire run better, build a new bridge or build a road or, whatever it was. The Spanish come in and they take that system and they turn it into their own Mita system, except instead of having it be things that are for the benefit of the Incan people, they make it so that it's basically about mining silver. And so the new Mita system is where, they're taking people away from their families and forcing them to go mine silver, which is incredibly dangerous. They also have them mining mercury because mercury is used to process the silver and turn it into what the Spanish want it to be. And this process of working with mercury is, it's incredibly poisonous. Lots and lots of indigenous Americans died from mercury poisoning, to the point where, families would maim their children so they wouldn't have to go work in the mines. Like, okay, we don't want to do this, but we're going to have to cut our son's hand off so that he won't go work in the mines, because if he goes to work in the mines, he will be killed. Yuck. So you can see that you can see where Spain's interests are. Spain is interested in making a lot of money. Okay, so how did Spain affect the culture of the Americas? Spain, the Spanish, like most other Europeans of this time period, became obsessed with race. They're very interested in categorizing different racial groups, different ethnic groups, and ranking them and trying to like study them and like figure out what race meant. And so this all was reflected in the casta system, which was the social hierarchy of the Spanish colonies. I do want you to know particularly what the top two ranks on this pyramid are. Peninsulares comes from the word peninsula. I'm recording this during the school day. Meaning the peninsula that Spain and Portugal are located on. So peninsulares are people in the colonies who are born in Spain. Europeans from Spain are peninsulares, and they're the top of the heap. They're like the ones with the most power. And then below them are Creoles. A Creole is a person of European descent, but who was born in the Americas to Spanish parents. So your parents are from Spain, but you were born here in the Americas, you're a Creole. And then there's all kinds of intermarrying and relationships between Europeans and Native Americans. And so the people who are children of a Spanish person and a Native American person are called mestizos. And it gets way more complicated than this. They have all kinds of ranks for all kinds of different combinations of parents. I'll show you more on that in a second. And then down below that were Native Americans, and below that were enslaved people brought here from Africa. We will definitely talk about the African transatlantic slave trade that's coming. I'm not ignoring that. We're just focused on the Americas right now. But yes, there were enslaved people brought to the Americas from Africa when Native American laborers were not, when they were dying and not getting as much work done as the Spanish wanted. They did turn to African slave labor. This is called a Costa painting. And you can see there are 16 different portraits. And in each portrait, there's a mom and a dad and a child. And so this is literally the Spanish doing paintings to represent the different combinations of people and providing people with names for the different, if a white person and a black person have a child, this is what we call it. They're very obsessed with racial hierarchy. It's very, and it definitely affects the way that your life would go based on how where you fit into this casta system, into this racial social hierarchy. If both of your parents were European, then your life would be a lot better than if one of them was not. More on that in class. And then the final thing I want to talk about is the Roman Catholic Church coming to the Americas. The Roman Catholic Church was very successful in being adopted throughout Latin America, which is what we call the territory controlled by Spain. What you see here is an image of somebody called the Virgin of Guadalupe. So this is the idea that the Virgin Mary showed herself to some indigenous Americans, revealed herself to them in a miracle. And it's a way of making the Roman Catholic Church appealing to indigenous Americans. And she became an important symbol of American Catholicism, and has festivals that celebrate her. And this is a cathedral that was built in Mexico City, which used to be Tenochtitlan. So the Spanish took over the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, and then on the ruins of the Templo Mayor, which was the big Aztec temple to the sun god, they took the stones from that temple and used it to build a Spanish cathedral, not the one that you see here, but this is the Spanish cathedral that then got erected permanently in its place. So this is just a symbol, a very powerful symbol of how the Spanish took over the Americas and made it their own and asserted dominance over the people of the Americas. So, how and why did Spain conquer the Americas? 3 to 4 complete sentences, please. Yeah, and thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you in class.